So up next, we're going to hear from three women who honestly are movement builders. They're working on two of the most important issues facing the United States today. Among those issues, voting rights and gun safety. Here to lead this conversation, and before I introduce her, I also just want to say thank you all so much. This is the end of my time as your MC, but it's been a pleasure, so please keep in touch again. And so here to lead this next conversation is the co-founder of I Am a Voter, Mandana, Dayani. Let's give them a round of applause and thanks again.
Do I just go up? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Hi, Shans. There's my lady. Hi. We get to start?
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Well, thank you all so much for having us here today, and to Vital Voices for being just the most incredible support for women around the world. As we sit here today, we're 8 months into a woman-led revolution in my home country of Iran, and we're seeing movements being led by women all around the world. And I think it causes all of us to take a moment and reflect on, how women create and lead movements, and also how we can all come together to support and amplify these movements that are being led by women everywhere. I'm thrilled to be with you here today. So these are two of my very good friends, and we do a lot of activism together. So we're hoping this can feel like a very easy conversation that is very fun. My name is Mandana Dayani. I am the creator and co-founder of an organization called I Am a Voter. A little bit about me before I pass it over to them. I was born in Iran. I left when I was about 6 years old through an incredible organization called HIAS that helps refugees resettle. I came to America and got to live the incredible American dream. Worked as a lawyer, worked as a talent agent, then in fashion and media, tech, entertainment, all of the things. I've had so many careers that we will save another panel for. But when I had my second daughter, I was home watching TV and I saw coverage of the child separation at the border. And I think as someone who had an experience emigrating, that was the hardest thing for me, to just see us separating children from their parents. I got on an airplane, I went to Tornillo, Texas. I didn't believe it, and I felt like I had to see what was happening. And that was the first time where I felt like we are in a crisis of losing our humanity, and didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just knew the things that I was good at, took a ton of meetings to figure out how I can give back with my skills. And everyone kept saying that if we wanted to have the most impact, we needed more people to vote. Having never worked in politics, I thought that would be very simple. And I was like, wait, I had that Legally Blonde moment of wait, it's hard. And so I did what I always do when I need to do something, and that is find the really smart women that I know to help me figure it out, and gathered about 20 amazing women to sit around a table with me and start figuring out what we can do to help excite and motivate voters around the country. And one of the amazing people that I got to do this work with is Debra Messing. And we were on vacation together. I'm going to get to who Debra is. Obviously, everyone knows who Debra is. But, Debra and I sat down and she said, well, who, we need to mobilize. And I was like, yes, of course. And she's like, well, who do we talk to? And I was like, I don't know, Shannon Watts? But to me, that's like saying I want to learn fashion and I'm just going to call Tom Ford. You don't just call Shannon Watts.
And I had been DMing with her, so I was like, I'll connect you. I'll connect you. And she literally, all the color left. She was like, what?
So a bit about Debra. She is an Emmy award-winning actress, producer, and social justice and human rights activist. She's best known for her Emmy and SAG award-winning role as Grace Adler on Will and Grace. She just filmed a Warner Brothers mob drama called Wise Guys with Robert De Niro, and just recently starred on Broadway in Birthday Candles. She's worked as global health ambassador for PSI, focusing on HIV and AIDS, has testified before the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa and Global Health. She received the Trevor Life Award from the Trevor Project and is on the founding board of the Body Agency Collective, which helps women around the world. She will actually be in Rwanda this summer, speaking at the Women Deliver Conference. She's also a founding member of I Am a Voter. So yes, as I said, she sends a message to Shannon Watts. 4 days later, I'm at the airport, my phone rings, and it's, hi, this is Shannon Watts. You would think Beyonce called me. I dropped my phone, had a full, like, this is the biggest superhero to me in the entire world. So Shannon Watts is, woke up angry the day after the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012. She, at the time, was a stay-at-home mother of 5 and was a former communications executive, and she created a Facebook page called Moms Demand Action and invited women to join her in standing up to the gun lobby. And then women do what they do, which is they organized around the world, around the country, and reached out to her about getting involved and forming chapters in their communities. And over the last 10 years, as a full-time volunteer, she's helped organize the country's largest grassroots movement against gun violence. Today, that movement has chapters in every state and is part of Everytown for Gun Safety, and is the largest gun violence prevention organization with 10 million supporters. And they've successfully shut down gun lobbyist plans at the ballot box in state legislatures and corporate America. She was Time 100 Most Influential this year and Glamour Woman of the Year award, and more importantly, my friend and mentor. So back to this phone call. And by the way, that's the amazing thing that you realize about a lot of these women-led movements, is just how much all of these movements begin with women who show up for other women and mentor them and offer them resources, just like Vital Voices does. And it's amazing how much this community continues to support each other. So I was on the phone with Shannon, and I said, hey, I've just assembled this amazing group of 25 women at that point. Is it weird that they're all women? Is that okay? Do I need to have other people on this thing? And your response was perfect. So Shannon, can you just share your response and kind of what you instinctively knew about women and mothers and their role in movements?
I just knew that you had the exact right group of people. I think women are the secret sauce to organizing and to advocacy. I will tell you that we tried to organize men early on, and it's a little like herding cats. So we just said, you know what, we'll wear the shirts and you guys follow us. And that's kind of what we've done for a decade. But if you go all the way back to Prohibition, when women were allowed to be activists in this country because men thought temperance was a Christian value, and then they could never really put that genie back in the bottle, because women were using their voices on something and they realized that they could make their families and their communities safer. All the way up to the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, it is women over and over and over who force change in this country. And so I think I said to you, you have the exact right people assembled.
Very true. A few years ago, Debra and I started a podcast called The Dissenters, where we interviewed incredible accidental activists, and honestly, it was like a way for us to become friends with people like Shannon, who we loved.
Yes.
But we did interview Shannon Watts and Secretary Clinton, and it was really amazing. And I think through that process, what I've learned, and I think many people have witnessed, is just how deeply you feel injustice in your bones, and a call to giving back and showing up. And you show up for causes in such a big way, regardless of the circumstances to your career and personal life. And where did that sense of standing up to injustice come from?
I grew up in Rhode Island. I was one of 3 Jewish kids in the entire school system. And we were victims of hate crimes. We had swastikas painted on our cars, and I learned very quickly that I was an other, and that I wasn't safe, and that it was best for me to just shrink myself and disappear. And obviously, I don't do that anymore. Yes, so now when I see any group that is marginalized, I'm like, I'm here. What can I do?
Yeah, we're going to come back to that fearlessness, because I do think that is a gateway for a lot of people who want to get off the sidelines. Mm-hmm. Shannon, what gave you the confidence to, we talked a lot in the Dissenters about taking that first step, right? How do you get off the sidelines? How do you show up? What I think gave you the confidence And what do you want to say to women who are passionate and want to get involved and maybe a little afraid to use their voice, since that is the theme of this incredible conference today?
You know, I never imagined that I would be an activist. I never imagined I would be a leader. I never certainly imagined I would be the tip of the spear on an issue like gun violence. I think, first of all, I'm glad that there was a little bit of naivete, right? I didn't realize I would immediately start getting threats of death and sexual violence to me and to my children. Even to this day, I travel with a security guard who their job is to take me to the hospital if I am shot during an event and I have to use an alias. I just want background checks on every gun sale. That is why my life is threatened in this country. I'm glad I didn't know that. But I do think what I have learned is that too often, and I've seen this over and over again, women have such brilliant ideas. They know when people need help, they know how to come in and offer that support, and yet at the same time they have a gating factor that I don't think men have, which is you gotta have all the T's crossed, gotta have all the I's dotted, because what if I don't know enough, or what if I fail in public? I have yet to meet a man, especially state lawmakers, who feel that way. And so, what I have hoped and what I have tried to do, and I think women are also uniquely positioned to do this, is to support and help one another and encourage them to become leaders. My favorite story from Moms Doing Action is Lucy McBath. For those of you who don't know her, a flight attendant whose son, Jordan Davis, was murdered, shot and killed by a white man. Jordan was a black teen, because his music was too loud. And Lucy immediately became an activist. She became a colleague at Moms Doing Action, and now she's a congresswoman. She ran for a seat held by Republicans for 30 years in Georgia, Newt Gingrich's old seat. And she won on this issue, and the first thing that she did was pass gun safety legislation. And so I have seen over and over again women like myself who are just ordinary, everyday, average American citizens who step up to fill in and who lead, I think, with kindness and compassion.
It's amazing. As I was thinking a lot about kind of the parallels in our journeys, and I think, all of us have shown the impact of shifting narratives and using culture to influence activism. I think with I'm a Voter, we knew that it was crucial to combat voter apathy and disengagement, and we were going to do that by inspiring people and exciting them and giving them a reason to show up at the polls, and leveraging culture and pop culture to be a part of their everyday conversation. Which led me to think about Debra, as like someone who I always considered a true cultural icon. You always figured out a way to turn this big platform that you were given into creating as much change as possible. And I think with Will and Grace, that show was so groundbreaking and instrumental in changing the hearts and minds of the world towards the LGBTQ community. And I know you've spoken obviously about how impactful that was for you and how meaningful that was to you. What did you learn from that, and what do you think we can learn from that about how that, how that narrative shifted and why you think that was effective?
I learned very quickly how powerful a tool comedy is. And you push and you scream, but if you can make them laugh and you could make them feel the mutual humanity, then all of a sudden all the walls start to come down. Very quick story, was in the airport, and a woman came up. I was in the middle of the country, and she was like, hi. She's like, my husband hates gays. I was like, okay, where is this going? And she said, but I love it. I love them. So I've been watching your show. And she was like, and my husband will not look at the TV. He's always behind his newspaper. And she was like, and after about 3 months, all of a sudden, that newspaper came down, and now he walks around going, just Jack. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, there is hope for everything.
Oh, I love that story so much. It's amazing. You know, I think what was also so powerful about watching you go through, you know, the incredible, you know, I don't even know how many years, 8 years of Will and Grace was, you know, you immediately saw the importance that it held and you showed up for the movement in every single way. You traveled to Africa, I can't even count how many times. You did all of this activism on behalf of HIV and AIDS. Can you just share a little bit about that experience and how you were able to shift and leverage your platform towards a cause?
I had never been a public speaker. I had never been an official activist, and I was made ambassador of HIV/AIDS for Population Services International. And I would go to different countries with pilot projects, and then we would meet different officials, and we would see things in action. And I would come back to the Hill, and I would be a witness. I would testify. You know, like Zimbabwe, we brought voluntary circumcision as a tool, and it was incredibly successful. And so when I came back, I was able to say, I saw this, I watched it, it's working. They need more money so that we can get out of Zimbabwe and we can just keep going from country to country. And our government gave us $100 million. Yeah, and so it made me realize that I am privileged to have a platform and I want to use it for good. And I'm not an expert, I don't pretend to be, but I can help spread people's voices.
Which I think is such an important lesson for everyone who wants to get involved, right? Because I think that barrier of like, well, I don't know enough about this. I'm not an expert, but there are so many ways that people can support. Like we always say, help the Glennon. I think it was like Glennon Doyle, but help the helpers is an incredibly powerful way to get involved. Shannon, you also, I think, have been so brilliant in the way that you have leveraged community and culture to mobilize people. I mean, I was like the biggest fan of burritos, not bullets, targeting Chipotle, and groceries, not guns, targeting Kroger to change their policies and impacting the lives of millions of Americans. But I actually wanted to talk more about what you've been able to prove is the importance of hope and positivity in mobilizing movements. And it feels like today there's so much negativity in the news and in social media and misinformation that sometimes it feels really discouraging. And I think when you started to show legislative wins and you started to show communities like showing up and progress, it felt like groundbreaking for you and the movement and the people that support you. And so maybe if you could just share about like what that experience was like and why people might need a little bit more patience in affecting change.
Yeah, you don't get involved in any kind of activism, especially gun safety, without the idea that you're going to lose sometimes, right? And in those early days, we were having a lot of losses. We're taking on the most powerful, wealthy special interest that's ever existed in this country. And my feeling was we aren't going to get volunteers to come into the organization and then stay, which is what you need, unless they feel hope, unless they feel like what they're doing is valuable. And so we actually came up with a phrase in our organization called losing forward. And it's this idea of you are going to lose. We win more than we lose, but you are going to lose. And then what do you learn from that loss so that you can keep going? That's actually also a phrase a lot of our volunteers have had tattooed on their bodies, keep going. You know, I don't think that people come to activism to feel sad or to have it be heavy. There has to be joy. There has to be hope. I often think that when, I go on like Morning Joe the day after a mass shooting tragedy, and they'll say to me like, nothing's happened. Aren't you hopeless? How do you do this work? And I think cynicism is kind of a laziness for inaction. If we give people that excuse, they won't get involved.
Yes.
And so what my role has been for the last decade is like an ambassador to say, yeah, actually, we've passed 500 gun safety laws in the last decade, including the first federal legislation in a generation. Actually, we've stopped the NRA's agenda 90% of the time every year for the last 8 years. Those are, yeah. But I think the other thing that you bring up, which is this dislike, I think, when people get involved in activism, especially young people, of incrementalism. I wish the system was set up for overnight wholesale change. I would have been doing something else for the last 9 years. It is not. The democracy is set up so that you have to show up at every gun bill hearing. You have to create relationships with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. You have to work on legislation and work on electoral cycles. You have to work on this culturally. That is how change happens. You don't have to be a full-time volunteer like me. You can find a piece of the work. We actually, in our organization, call it naptivism. So when your kid is taking a nap, you can send an email or make a call or send a tweet. But Alice Walker said, activism is the rent I pay to live on the planet. And we all have to play a role in that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation I have with young voters all the time too, and all voters. But it's this idea of like, well, I voted and nothing happened. I'm like, but you're not done. It's not like done. You can't be done with democracy. Like you voted one time.
Yeah.
That's not, you know. So yes, I think this we have to show up,
Yep.
right? How do you? I mean, this is kind of directed at both of you, but how do you? You know, having been a part of so many different movements and working with so many incredible women around the world, how do you think that we can all help other women advance their causes? How do we keep people engaged and keep attention on movements? Because now it does feel often that like the huge things can feel like a 2-day news cycle.
I think what was being said earlier about the connections that are made here, the like-minded people here who are willing and excited to support and mentor the other women here. I think that is required. Mm-hmm. It's required for progress, and it's our responsibility to try and open the aperture a little bit more to bring more women in. And you know, with I'm a Voter, that was a lot of it was, you know what, you don't have to call yourself an activist. You can just make sure that 5 of your neighbors are voting, you know, and you will have done something really great. Mm-hmm. And so making it less scary for people.
Deb uses the velvet glove, I use the velvet hammer, which is to say, you know, I have started saying to women at meetings like this, you have a moral obligation to be a leader and to run for office in this country right now, at this time in history. I don't care if you run for coroner or sheriff or city council or school board. Think about how you can lead in your community, because, you know, the saying is that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. Women are on the menu. Women's rights and safety are on the menu. And so I'm on the board of Emerge America, where we train progressive women to run for office. 140 of our volunteers ran for office this last legislative cycle and won. And now,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's important because they have a seat at the table now. And they're going to make policies that protect our families and communities. But I will tell you that there are groups like Moms for Liberty, or whatever the hell they're called, who are not for liberty. They are for taking away your kids' rights. And as the mom of a non-binary kid, that scares the hell out of me. And so that's what is on the table. And Deb says it very nicely. But I would just say, tonight when you go home, think about how you can lead where you live. And that may include running for office.
Shannon, I know many here would love to know why you are stepping back after 10 years. As you know, Debra and I think that you are a national hero. There should be monuments of you everywhere, and we are very grateful for your many, many years that you've dedicated to protecting our communities and families.
I think that's also a unique way that women lead, which is, I didn't start Moms Demand Action thinking, how can I be a leader for the rest of my life and no one can ever, step in and do this work. You see too many men doing that, I think, at companies and in Congress. When every year for the last 10 years, I've said to myself, when should I step back? I think a founder's role is finite. I'm so thrilled that I made that decision last year. It felt like the right time. I was a white suburban mom who felt my kids weren't safe in their schools when I started Moms Demand Action. And I'm handing the organization over to a Black queer woman who lives in Washington, D.C., who sees this issue much differently than I do. I think that is how organizations stay healthy and evolve. And last into perpetuity. And that was my original goal with Moms Demand Action.
Thank you. I have 2 more minutes. Is that okay? I'm going to get into the closing in 2 seconds. Debra, I think that, again, we talk so much about courage in showing up in movements, and I know that you have shown up for causes in so many ways. I have seen you lose jobs and not get a lot of opportunities. I have seen the President of the United States attack you, and you continue to persevere. And I think for people that want to get off the sidelines or people that run companies and aren't sure that they can show up and dedicate resources, because what if they lose a customer or a follower or a friend? Can you just give us like 1 minute on how you just keep going?
If there's a choice between a job, an acting job, and showing up to be a part of a movement, the movement always comes first. And I feel like it's my soul's purpose. So I acknowledge and accept all the obstacles that come with that, and all the hate that comes with that, and I'm fine with it.
I think you once said to me, your integrity is worth more than any gig, which I think is very true.
Yeah.
I'm just going to close with, I think today our rights as women are under threat, and my daughters have fewer rights than I do, which feels really strange and just not okay. I think the reversal of Roe v. Wade shook us all, and we're continuing to face these very extremist minority views. But also sometimes it feels like we're not hearing about what's happening. Like, I don't know where the stories are of the women and what's happening around the country. And, there are so many people whose lives are at risk. And sometimes I wonder whether there's just been this desensitization of us because of all the things that are happening and everything that's coming at us through news and social media all the time. And we do know that the majority of Americans want access to safe and legal abortions, and that they want gun safety measures. But this does feel like another moment where we as women need to make a decision about whether we are going to fight or change the channel. And I guess any parting words from you too, to women?
Oh, don't even think about changing the channel. We keep going. That's it. We can just keep fighting and fighting harder and fighting louder, and that's the only option.
I just think that what we have done as women in the last couple of years over and over again, from Kansas to Wisconsin, where we have shown up and said we will not tolerate having our rights rolled back, that we will not be dehumanized, and that we will fight for our democracy, is one of the most impressive things I've seen in my lifetime. And we can't get tired. We have to keep going. As I said, let's all get that tattooed on our bodies, because it is so incredibly important that we not give up and that we hand the torch over to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Everyone, please register to vote. Amazing. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.